What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, November 22nd, 2016, and the Tantrum Squad is back at it. Massive denial of service attack on my WhatReallyHappened.com server just as we were about to go to airtime, and I can't deal with it. You would think that these buttercups and these snowflakes would get tired of doing this, but I guess the tantrum has to run its course, and somebody needs to throw an ice bucket challenge into their face. Anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today besides the Tantrum Squad here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I think that's Mike back in our control room today. I really forgot to make sure when I checked on in. I think he's getting better. We'll find out there for later on in the show here. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here. A quick reminder, we are live today and tomorrow. Thursday and Friday is going to be replay shows. We'll be back live next Monday. Now then, I'm sure a lot of you are sharing our disappointment in this announcement from Trump's aide, Kellyanne Conway, that there is no plan to pursue charges against Hillary Clinton, blah, 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 healing, hasn't she suffered enough, and everybody's kind of upset. They viewed prosecution of Hillary Clinton as a Trump campaign promise, and it did generate a huge amount of support for him. And I've been getting floods and floods of angry emails today from people just upset and very, very angry, and I understand that. I'm very disappointed. I want to live in a just nation where those who commit great crimes will suffer greatly for them. I don't like having a criminal class that's above the law, and Trump has already damaged his credibility as chief enforcer of the U.S. laws. He's also handed Congress the means to impeach him because it's called obstruction of justice. If President Trump tells the Attorney General and the FBI to stand down, that is obstruction of justice. Now, politics is a practical profession, and I'll tell you what I think may be going on. The fact that Conway was the one who delivered this message signals that it is a political message rather than a legal one. Now, Donald Trump knows that all this rioting in Portland and elsewhere, along with all the death threats against the electors, is organized by a group of people deathly afraid of going to jail, and even willing to assassinate him to avoid their day in court. So what I suspect may have happened is a deal has been made for Hillary to fade quietly into private life in exchange for calling off the riots and threats to the electors, which I will expect to see in the next few days. Now, I don't like this decision, but I understand why Donald Trump may have seen this as the best way to quiet down those trying to delegitimize him before he even takes the oath of office. And if I am correct, and Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests with that private email server and using her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments, then Trump doesn't need a scandal on such a scale to become public and threaten the entire government he is about to take charge of. After all, he didn't make this mess, and he probably prefers not to have to deal with it. And like I said, I don't like this decision, but I understand why Trump may have seen this as the optimal course. Now, not everybody agrees with me. A lot of people are saying that Trump is saying this in order to forestall Obama issuing a pardon for Hillary Clinton, and that once he's president, things could very well change. Well, he could have done that privately without making it public, because he has damaged himself a lot. And I don't think he did it without a really, really good reason. So we're going to have to be let time solve that mystery, but I think that's what happened. If we do see the protests start to fade away, if we do see the threats to the electors start to fade away, then yes, a deal was made. Hillary stops trying to attack Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will call off the legal dogs. Like I said, Trump may have handed a hostile Congress the means by which they could impeach him. It's called obstruction of justice. Now then, moving on. I hate to say I told you so. Actually, no, I rather enjoy it. Okay, today we are seeing all over the corporate media the complete discrediting of that whole Pizzagate myth of pedophiles and all the rest of it. Remember, I told you right from the beginning, there's nothing there but supposition and assumption and a bunch of graphics, and it just didn't feel right. It felt like a setup, and now it is. And so we're seeing all over the corporate media, the New York Times, oh, it's just a pizza parlor. There's no child trafficking. Look at those wackos in the independent media and all the fake news they put on out. And I told you this was a classic poison the well setup. And the corporate media and the government planted this on the internet like they planted the no plane at the Pentagon nonsense. So now the corporate media has a handle to say, oh, you don't want to listen to the independent media. They're full of fake news. They had that Pizzagate thing here, and they're the same people who said Hillary was cheating on the primaries and was trying to cheat the elections and threaten the... So you shouldn't listen to anything the independent media says because they all had that Pizzagate thing. Well, obviously I didn't. The positive news out of all of this, of course, is that I was able to identify the obvious agent provocateurs because those were the ones who 20, 30 emails, why aren't you publishing? You must publish it. You must put this on your website. And now they are now all in my email ban list. So there was a little bit of positive out of there. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about the Pizzagate has proven to have been a false poison the well propaganda operation. We talked briefly about Donald Trump announcing there's no plan to go after Hillary Clinton criminally, but of course Donald Trump can't order the Congress to stop their investigations, which are not criminal investigations anyway. They're fact-finding investigations, so we'll get a little bit more of the truth out there. And then a lot of people are very, very angry, and I understand that. I'm angry too. I would like to see Hillary Clinton in jail. But I understand that there may have been this deal made for Hillary Clinton to stop staging these riots in Portland and Los Angeles, stop sending death threats to the electors, and in exchange, Trump is going to say, you're not going to go to jail. Take your ill-gotten gains and retire quietly and go and sin no more. Now, the corporate media is still out there trying to claim or trying to promise their readers they'll do better in the future, at the same time continuing to try and smear the independent media with Pizzagate. The Los Angeles Times issued their letter to their readers. Yes, now that we're through the election, we promise we will be more fair, we'll be more honest, we'll be more balanced. We're the trustworthy source that you should come to. Again, at the same time, they're still out there playing the same games they always have. The reason is simple economics. They're paid the big bucks to control your mind. Nobody's going to pay them that kind of money to keep you informed. It just doesn't work on out. If they're going to go on making the money they've been making, they have to go on selling the product they have been selling all along, which is your mind. That's what they're really all about, selling your mind. Now, getting on to the fake news and who is really the fake and who is not. Remember all those TV news networks and newspapers and everything that said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor? That was fake news. Or all those corporate media outlets who blamed the DNC email hack on the Russians without a shred of proof, knowing they were spewing fake news. That's the fake news. See, the New York Times has actually openly admitted it is willing to make up false news stories to make sure conservative candidates are defeated in elections. So if the Times fabricates a story, then publishes it, then everybody else, the obedient left-wing media, repeats it, citing the New York Times as their trusted source. Now, ultimately, of course, when it comes to fake news, the U.S. government is the biggest culprit. And we have talked before about Operation Mockingbird, which is the mechanism by which the CIA controls the corporate media. And at this point, Americans are waking up and realize it isn't something that's rare or unusual or occasional when they're lied to by politicians and the media. It's nonstop. It really is like living in a real-life version of the Matrix. You look at these screens or you read those newspapers or you listen to the radio or your device, and you think that's the real world, and it absolutely is not. Now, remember when CIA Director Colby was testifying before Congress during 1975 during the Church Committee hearings into illegal actions by the CIA. And he openly admitted the CIA directs corporate media how to lie to the American public. How many times do you have to be reminded that you are being lied to by the government, by the corporate media? They even admit it. So, now today is the anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and I don't need to go into it. Everybody already knows the issues there. The vast majority of Americans now know there was a cover-up. The Warren Report was a joke, and Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone. But as long as we're on the subject of fake news, we cannot allow the anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination to pass without remembering Dan Rather. Now, back in 1963, Dan Rather was an unknown newscaster from a small market Texas TV station. When the Zapruder film first surfaced, he viewed it. Nobody showed it. The Zapruder film was not shown publicly until Jim Garrison's trial against Clay Shaw. Oh, it's too shocking, it's too bloody, the American people don't need to see it. But we have this newscaster who has looked at it, and he'll tell you what it shows. And what Dan Rather told all of America was the shot to Kennedy's head rocketed his head forward. And we have that video on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. Rocketed forward, rocketed forward. Because it was supposed to be coming from the book depository. And Dan Rather was immediately promoted to network stardom following that slight little fib that he did. Now, when Jim Garrison took Clay Shaw to trial, he dragged the Zapruder film into the public, and almost immediately everybody could see Dan Rather lied. Kennedy's head is thrown violently backwards because he's being shot from the front. And then the government hired all these scientists to try and concoct reasons why, oh, if you're shot from the back, your head is going to fling back. It's jet effect, it's rocket, it's the camera angles. They even got Walter Cronkite involved in all of this fakery. But it doesn't change the fact that Dan Rather misrepresented what was on that film to the American people. So you've always lived in a world of fake news. It isn't anything recent. It's been ongoing for as long as you have been alive. And you need to remember that. While the corporate media screams that they're fake, we're real, you should trust us. You should never trust anybody. Remember when Arlen Specter was finally confronted on the magic bullet theory in Senate hearings? I remember when Texas Governor John Connally finally passed away, and then Attorney General Janet Reno said, we might want to dig out those bullet fragments from inside his leg, because it seems that there's more fragments there than we're missing from the magic bullet. Ooh, sorry, stop kicking me, stop kicking me. And boy, that one went away real fast. Because the x-rays of the bullet fragments that were still in Governor John Connally's leg were clearly much more massive than the tiny amount of mass missing from the so-called magic bullet. Now, each new government that comes on in, unfortunately, inherits the continuation of lies and cover-ups from past administrations. And unfortunately, Trump is no different. At some point, if this nation is to be saved, and I'm still not convinced it can be done even with President Trump, there has to be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that will have the courage to stand up there and say, yeah, okay, previous governments have lied to you about this and this and this and this and this, and while we personally were not involved back then, we acknowledge the lies took place, and we apologize collectively for them, and we promise we'll do better. Absent that, I think we're on a very clear path where the government and corporate media's credibility is in decline, and they can't reverse it, even with hoaxes like Pizzagate and attempting to smear the independent media. Because I wasn't the only one out there saying this Pizzagate is a setup. People are recognizing these things when they see them. Now then, another instance of fake news, as it were. When Donald Trump called Hillary Clinton a bigot, the corporate media just went ballistic, saying, he's gone too far, he's gone too far. But then the Clinton campaign releases a video saying Mr. Trump is the candidate of the KKK, and, oh, that's okay, that's freedom of speech. And one of the reasons that the corporate media is in such trouble was this obvious display of bias. And in a lot of these faux repentant letters to their readers, viewers that we're seeing come out of the corporate media, they're acknowledging, well, yeah, we did have a little bias. You know, we're human beings too, but we promise we won't do it anymore. The thing is, every time the corporate media does get caught in another lie, they say the same thing. Oh, yeah, we'll do better. And they never do. And they can't. Because they make the money they make to lie to you. They can't change their business model. Nobody's going to pay them the money they're being paid to start telling the truth. It's just never going to happen. And so that's why they're on the warpath against the independent media. Because if they can't lie to you with impunity, ooh boy, those big paychecks are going to go away. Now, Donald Trump is clearly empathetic to our situation out here, because Trump is now starting to meet the heads of various media. He had a meeting with a whole bunch of people at Trump Tower yesterday and with the New York Times today. And everybody walked into the Trump Tower figuring that they were going to get the ground rules of their access to the Trump White House. And instead, they got a Trump-style dressing down where he stood there and pointed at all these people, starting with Jeff Zucker, and saying, you're all a bunch of liars. People who were in the room said it was like facing a firing squad. Trump was out there saying, everyone at CNN is a liar and you should be ashamed. And from the point of view of the corporate media, it was a total disaster. They're not getting the access to the White House they thought they were going to be getting. And the media has now responded by going after Donald Trump harder than they did before. Because the corporate media all of a sudden seems to think they're really in charge of the country. They were supposed to pick our next president. And they didn't get the one they want, so they're just going to go after Donald Trump more. And again, they're just showing themselves to the world to be a bunch of spoiled brats who are just so used to getting their own way, and they react badly when they don't, like the people who have crashed my website now. Now, the anti-Trump protests are still going on, and they're not really making a very positive impression. Apparently, some of the anti-Trump protesters up in Portland decided they were going to go out and sign wave on the I-5, and to nobody's surprise, one of them got hit by a car. Guys, you're not supposed to be up there on the interstates for any reason. I mean, that was just ridiculous here. Now, this is a fun story. And apparently, the Democrats, the liberals, are so traumatized by President Trump, they're retreating into an alternative reality. There is a virtual reality app called Liberal America Simulator 2016, which offers the users an alternate universe where Bernie Sanders won the presidency and has implemented progressive policies that converted America to the socialist, multicultural utopia they all dream of. This is getting a little creepy and weird. These people are just not dealing with reality. I think somebody needs to hack this app so that while they're wearing those silly little goggles, they start wandering around the I-5. That might solve a lot of problems right there. But taking this political correctness, we must have a safe zone stuff to the most absurd possible heights. There's a college in Massachusetts has now banned the American flag to stop, quote, hate-based violence, end quote. This is the U.S. flag we're talking about. The Stars and Stripes is now banned on this Massachusetts college campus. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to turn over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural now. As you know, the battle's continuing in Aleppo. There have been allegations that the U.S.-backed terrorists have been using chemical weapons on everybody around them, Syrian troops, civilians, and so forth. Russian chemical weapons experts are saying they are finding evidence of these chemical weapons. So they put in a request for the Organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to send their experts in to confirm. Now, back when Obama and John Kerry were trying to frame Assad for the use of the weapons, they were always hot for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, to go on in with their experts. Yeah, go on in, stand right here, and you will conveniently see a chemical weapon used right in front of you. Today, though, is very, very different. The OPCW is refusing to send their own experts in to verify the Russian findings, and apparently this is under pressure from Western nations, primarily the United States. Now, in another context, on the so-called fake news front, over at liveleak.com, they have a wonderful video they put together. We just linked to it to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com, where they went back and started collecting all these headlines that appeared in the corporate media, newspapers, or on TV broadcasts, how Russia had just bombed the last hospital in Aleppo. And this was a story that was constantly being replayed and replayed and replayed, until finally the number of hospitals, the number of last hospitals that the U.S. media claimed Russia had destroyed, totaled somewhere over 20. So it's not really surprising that when Russia Today was in that State Department meeting, they said, can you give us the names of these hospitals that Russia supposedly destroyed and provide any proof that Russia had anything to do with it? And, of course, that tripped off the State Department spokesman to start screaming about how Russia Today wasn't real media. You've got to sit at the back of the room. And then, of course, one of the reporters for one of the other media outlets, to their credit, said, it's a reasonable question. And that provoked this full-on hysterical meltdown. So, now, yesterday we were reporting on how Turkey has had second thoughts about joining the European Union. Wise move, Erdogan. And would consider pivoting over to Russia and China to join their security bloc. And China has now announced Turkey would be welcome. Looks like it's a done deal. I mean, it's certainly well on the way. I'm sure there's going to be fine details to work on out. But Turkey is pivoting away from the U.S. Of course, what we can expect the corporate media to do, based on the prior precedent of Crimea, is they'll start screaming that China stole Turkey. No, Turkey didn't want to become part of China. China came in and stole them the way Putin stole Crimea. So what can I tell you? Over in France, as we mentioned yesterday, Sarkozy is already out of the presidential running, and it looks like Marine Le Pen is on her way. Now, Amnesty International has wagged their institutional finger at Great Britain and basically accusing Britain for acting like almost like cheerleaders for Bahrain's inadequate human rights reforms, saying that they're all out there acting like they're in support of human rights, but nothing, as usual, is getting done. Now, though, over in northern Iraq, a little bit of a fly in the ointment, at least from the U.S. side. The Prime Minister of Iraq is now insisting the Kurds have to return all the territory they seized. Now, this is not going to sit very well because the U.S. agenda was to grab parts of Iraq, Syria, and Turkey and create a new nation of Kurdistan in order to continue the process of balkanizing the Middle East from large countries hard to push around down to little tiny countries that were easy for the U.S. and for Israel to bully. And Iraq is now saying, absolutely not. We don't want to go along with that. Turkey didn't like that idea either. Neither did Syria. Now, we've been talking about U.S. weapons. Very expensive, don't work very well. Yes, we have another story about that. We'll be right back after these few words. It's unusual for us not to have callers this early in the show, so hopefully the phone lines are working. Actually, they are working here. Now then, we're talking about the weapons. We have criticized, justifiably, the F-22. Very expensive, asphyxiates its pilots. We have criticized the new aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford. It's full of all kinds of whiz-bang, high-tech, speculative technology. And even the Pentagon is saying we shouldn't have tried to do it all at the same time. And the Gerald R. Ford may never actually be usable in real combat. Then we have the Independence-class littoral combat ship, suffering major corrosion problems. The lead ship has already had to be dry docked and have major parts of its hull replaced. The Freedom-class littoral combat ships, constant problems with their power chain, between the engines and the transmission and everything, just grinding up. And, of course, the F-35, which yesterday we were reporting, Pentagon's own testing people are saying this thing will never be ready to go into real combat, but it'll look really swell at the air shows, and that makes that $1 trillion worth it. Well, now there's a new problem with the USS Zumwalt, the $4 billion stealth destroyer. With the weird upside-down hulls, the stealth ship can be easily recognized from space, was going through the Panama Canal, headed for its new home port of San Diego, and all of a sudden, water started leaking in through the shaft seals into the electric motors that power those propellers. Now, I'm sure you're aware that seawater and electric motors is not a good combination, and to nobody's surprise, the engines stopped. And the power system, the integrated power systems, they've got like one big power system powering everything, that failed. So everything went down. Sensors, weapons, crew services, lights, radar, everything. Just blanked it down. And the Zumwalt started drifting and actually hit the side of the canal, scraping the paint. And it had to be towed over to a naval facility that used to be a U.S. Navy base. Now it's owned by Panama, but Panama said, sure, go on in and tie it up. And they're going to have to do repairs right there before they can limp it back up to San Diego. Now, something about ship design. As you know, I live here on Oahu, and down at the bottom of the hill is Pearl Harbor. And I do go out there and I take the tours of the submarine, the Arizona Memorial, and of course the Missouri. And not too long ago, as part of a charity thing, I was able to get on one of the private tours that take you deeper into the ship than normal tourists are going to go. And the design of the ship made a great deal of sense for something that was going out to war. There was the outer part of the ship, where everybody lived and worked, and then there was a center core of the ship that was heavily armed. And during combat, everybody goes into that center core so that anything hitting the outside, it's basically throwaway damage. One of the things that was immediately obvious is everything to do with electricity and power was done in duplication, triplication, 5 and 6, multiple ways to run wires. From the control room that actually fires the main artillery, there are no less than 20 different circuits traveling through different routes of the ship to get to those guns. And that's how you survive in a combat situation. And for the Zumwalt to be put totally out of service by a single failure, that's not very good design. It's not very good design at all. I remember, I think it was about 2 years ago, the Navy was playing with one of their drones, and they lost control of it, and it actually punched through the radar housing, that little projection that holds the spy radar on an Arleigh Burke, just punched right on through the aluminum and destroyed $30 million worth of computers. I don't know what they're thinking over there at the Pentagon, and that may be one of the reasons why Trump has picked a retired general to be the new Secretary of Defense, which breaks a long tradition. We've had civilians in charge of the Defense Department. These are people who can be basically snookered by the Joint Chiefs. Throw money at things without knowing what they're throwing them at. So this may be a new a return of practicality and actually usability to our military design. Now, according to Stephen Lendman, who's a journalist and political commentator, his sources are telling him that Barack Obama really wanted to have a victory in Syria to go out of his term in the White House on as part of his legacy. War president, we are victorious against Assad. Not going to happen, obviously. unless he just hauls off and declares a nuclear attack on Damascus. And who knows, he might. We've got a long way to go till January 20th. We have a long way to go just to December 19th. And some of these people are certifiable, and we don't know what they could do. We know the Warhawks would love to get a hot war going with Russia before Trump can take office. And that would be a really good way to do it. Now, turning to the economic news. Down in Venezuela, they have now imposed a cap on bank withdrawals of just $5 per day to keep the banking system from collapse. Now, remember, it has come on out. Venezuela has been the victim of economic war by the United States. The United States has wanted control of Venezuela and its oil going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. They tried to oust Chavez. He was actually out of power for about a week and then put back in. After he passed away, Venezuela got a new leader with Hugo Chavez-like ideas. Wants to sell Venezuela's oil for the yuan and for the ruble and not the U.S. dollar. And the U.S. has been trying to destroy them for a very long time. Look how many people are being made miserable and suffering by U.S. foreign policy. And then they wonder why the American people stood up and said, we've had enough of that. Okay, we got a caller on the line here. Kenny in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
So you were talking a couple of days ago. You were talking about James Piper leaving, and you said, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." You should have said, "Don't let the door hit you where the dog should have bit you."
I have not heard that one before, but sounds really good.
Yeah, I heard that on a cartoon. But anyway, the real reason I'm calling is, Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show was the head of about Hillary not being prosecuted, and I just sent the email of his YouTube video to you.
Okay.
So I sent an email with his YouTube video to you. But basically, and I think probably the reason that they were so slow to call Wisconsin and whatever is, Trump's people were basically striking a deal with the Clintons that if Trump gets in, the Clintons walk. And I think that's why Hillary conceded so gracefully, and Obama did as well.
Hillary did not concede. Hillary did not concede graciously. She didn't concede on election night. She beat up her campaign manager when she did show up to make a speech the next day dressed in purple. I mean, it looked like she'd been rode hard and put away wet. And certainly these ongoing riots in Portland and this campaign of death threats against the electors signals to me that that John Podesta was correct when he said, we're not done with this yet. So I think the deal that was made between Trump and Hillary is much more recent. And basically they said, I'll make sure you don't go to prison. You stop attacking our electors, and you tone these riots down. So what we'll see, by this time next week, we'll know if the rioters and the hackers and the death threats go away. Then we'll know that was the nature of the deal.
Yeah, at least she appeared to concede graciously. But I agree. And prison's too good for her anyway. I think they should send her to Haiti and make her do what Gary Hagan was doing.
I think they ought to make Hillary the ambassador to Libya, and when she calls for help, they ignore her.
That would work too. Either way, just putting her in prison to stare at the wall all day is too good for her anyway.
Well, again, even prison isn't enough. The way that you really hurt a money junkie is you take their money away. Larry Klayman had a solid RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, and had it not been blocked by a Clinton-appointed judge, that would have emptied the place. And don't forget, the IRS is still investigating the Clinton Foundation as to whether it's really a tax-exempt 501c3. And if the IRS concludes it isn't, the resulting tax bill, and it won't be a criminal prosecution, but that resulting tax bill for the Clintons will make them poor again.
Well, let's hope so. I'm sure they'll find a way around it, though.
Well, you know, I really don't want to see that. I don't want to see our kids have to grow up in a world where if they steal a can of beer from a convenience store, they're going to go to prison for 5 years. But if their rulers steal the country from them and lie to them, that it's perfectly okay. I subscribe to the founding principles of this nation, that it is a nation of laws that apply equally to everybody, from the guy laying the bricks on the patio all the way up to the occupant of the Oval Office themselves. That's the nation that I support, and that's the nation that I want to get us back to. Not this new feudalism where the nobility are immune for their acts.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay?
Alrighty.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Starting to think the phone lines didn't work here. Now then, the central banks are indicating their next move. They're definitely on a roll to try and ban cash so that your money is always in their banks, at which point they can start raising their service fees and you can't do a thing about it. Now, they've already started banning cash in large part over in India. They almost crashed the economy. Gold is pushing close to $3,000 an ounce over there. Somebody wrote on in and said, we need to do like Goldfinger and get a Rolls Royce that, you know, is really made out of gold and, you know, send it over there and make a bunch of money. But that's what's going on. We're being told we should not even have the freedom to have the wealth that we work for in our own pocket. And that really is absurd. If all of the money is in the banks and the banks collapse, there's nothing out here for us to function on, is there? This is not a policy that really is planning for the welfare of the nation and the American people in the event of an economic catastrophe. This is a policy that, as usual, is there to protect the banks. Because in the eyes of our government, banks are very important, and you people, well, you're only good for breeding new workers and soldiers. You couldn't even vote for Hillary, so why should we give a codswallop about you here? Now, over in Germany, Alternative for Germany, Member of Parliament Beatrice von Storch is saying that there should be an investigation into Angela Merkel because her open-door immigration policy has led to thousands of deaths of migrants drowning in the Mediterranean. And it's a bit of a reach, but it is a legitimate point. Here in the United States, we'd call it an attractive nuisance. If you have something really cool on your property and some kids come into your yard to look at it really closely and they get hurt, they can sue you. Because even though they're on your property illegally, you had an attractive nuisance. You lured them in. Well, that's what Angela Merkel did with the open-door immigration policy. Come on in, we'll give you free stuff. And a lot of people died as a result. So there is legitimate grounds to say, yes, Angela Merkel bears part of the responsibility for those thousands of deaths. Now, we're hearing here in the U.S. that Obama's going away to President Trump is to try and magnify the impact of the immigration crisis as hard as possible so that Trump possibly can't undo it. And we are seeing a report where border agents have been ordered to leave the corridors open, and illegals are flooding in right now, 1,500 per day. Complicating that problem is that federal officials are saying that thousands of blank green cards have all of a sudden gone missing. And these cards could be used to allow terrorists and criminals to stay in the country, or just any illegal who can come up with the money. And here's where it gets into really bizarro land. Okay, over in Denver, Colorado, there is a sheriff a sheriff's department rather, that has as their employment policy, you must be a U.S. citizen to be in the sheriff's department. Loretta Lynch's Department of Justice has just hit the Denver Sheriff Department with a fine for refusing to hire non-citizens into the position of sheriffs. I mean, that to me, that is way over the shark on that one. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Bernard in Vancouver, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good morning, or good day. What's on my mind is the assassination of the late President Kennedy, but also the nature of security of your presidents. But I'll mention a thing first. There was an interview this morning on CBC with the granddaughter of Zapruder, and you're talking about Dan Rather, what she reports, and she studied this and knows it well and has written a book on it. She said Dan Rather was part of a group that had a gentleman's agreement that no one would take advantage and jump the gun and go public with a report before a certain time or whatever, but he did jump the gun, and she thinks he was mistaken, maybe being a little generous. So if he's got it wrong and he also gets the jump on the gun, it seems like he's in a position to get that implanted in the public mind in kind of an insidious way.
Well, there's no gentleman's agreement. Within the world of the corporate media, stories have what is called an embargo time. And that is to allow the stories to be distributed to all the members of a syndication group, and everybody is under contract to say that they can't run it until the embargo time. Maybe Rather jumped the gun, but to this very day, he's never acknowledged that he made a mistake all the way back there in Texas. He simply won't talk about it. And to me, that doesn't mean it's a simple mistake, because he could say, I made a mistake, heat of the moment, I made a mistake, and you know, but he won't touch it. He absolutely won't touch it. Won't acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm. Well, she said he was paid $50,000 for the print photo rights and $100,000 for the movie rights. So, and then the excuse that Time Life gave them was that the pictures were too graphic and too shocking and couldn't be shown to the public. So, and they didn't choose to do a film or anything. They just sat on it, as you say, until the Garrison probe.
And then, you know, what's really interesting, I remember this very vividly, when Garrison's trial made the Zapruder film public. Okay, the corporate media printed clips from the Zapruder film, and they reversed the two around the headshot to support the head being flung forward story. I mean, if you look at my John F. Kennedy page, you will see all the corporate media was lying through their teeth, even back then. We've got to take a break for commercials, Bernard. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. The Tantrum Squad is still messing around with my system, and we'll just have to put up with their nonsense until they decide that they're going to go away. But I did want to go back. I'm putting up the sub-page of my John F. Kennedy assassination page. And basically, it shows that, yes, even all the way back in 1963, the corporate media was feeding you a line of bovine excrement at the behest of the government. And in particular, this has to do with the December 14th, 1963 issue of Post. And even back then, I was 11 years old at the time. Even back then, I had the instincts of an archivist, and I saved everything related to the Kennedy assassination. And I didn't really look at it until Jim Garrison's case against Clay Shaw. Then I actually looked very closely, objectively, at what was in these publications, and I could see there's a problem. And one example that has always been there was a photograph on page 22 of this December 14th, 1963 issue of Post magazine where they had a photo, the assassin's view. And the photo's been taken through a rifle scope, and it's looking down the road and the cars in front, and they have two people playing Kennedy and Connolly, and they're perfectly lined up, and yes, it just makes perfect sense that the same bullet struck them both. There's only one problem. It's not taken from the 6th floor of the book depository. It's taken from the ground floor of the Daltex building, which, by the way, witnesses said one of the assassins was there. The Post staged a photo, and what's really interesting is the very distinctive brickwork of the book depository is visible on the right-hand side of this photo. You know it's not from inside the book depository. And it's just amazing. And then, of course, there was the photo taken by AP photographer James Alkins that captured the moment Kennedy grabbed his throat. And in the doorway, you can see Lee Harvey Oswald at ground level. I mean, it really is Very obvious when you go back and look at it objectively, what's going on. So, anyway, getting on back to immigration and the rest of it. Barack Obama and Angela Merkel are out there saying globalization is here to stay. They're out there saying we're going to make sure Donald Trump can't undo our push for the one world government. We're here to stay forever. And I can imagine the Roman emperors or even Alexander the Great saying the same thing. Our empire spans the globe. It'll never, ever go away. And then, of course, it did. A little bit of arrogance going on there. Laura Ingraham is out there correctly saying, we have a mass of humanity just walking across the border and availing themselves of social services while we ignore our veterans. And there's a solution. Let's make welfare as hard to get as veterans' benefits, and a lot of these problems are going to go away. We got to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2 here, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And, boy, my server is just under amazingly intense attack right now, and I have to wonder why. What does it signify? I mean, the election is over. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's much to be had, much to be gained with this kind of behavior other than tantrums and so forth and so on. But I'll just have to wait and deal with this, after the show is over, because they always pick when I'm on the air to do this, because they know I can't do 3 things at once here. Now then, Chris Matthews took Rachel Maddow to task. Rachel Maddow is fully on board with this idea that anybody who rejects the illegal immigrants or the refugees are being heartless and racist and all the rest of that. And Chris Matthews took her to task for saying, look, the American people are against illegal immigration, and it's not racism. Okay, it's economic, and it is the fact that these people are committing a crime, and we shouldn't reward people for criminal behavior, whether it's an illegal immigrant or Hillary Clinton. Illegal is not a race, Rachel. We're going to go to the phones here. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I had a topic. I missed you the last couple of days because I was out of town and I didn't catch up on your shows. But if you've already discussed it, then I'll hang up or whatever. But these Podesta brothers, I'm originally from Nebraska, and I know you know all about the Franklin Credit Union and that whole sex pedophile thing that was hushed up. This Podesta thing with this missing girl in Portugal. This whole Pizzagate thing, it looks just like the Franklin Credit thing.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. Pizzagate is a poison the well propaganda operation, and today we saw the corporate media uncork, and I told everybody from the beginning this smelled like a setup. And the corporate media has uncorked on the independent media saying, we investigated, there's nothing but pizza parlors there. Look how silly the independent media was for reporting this. It proves they're just full of fake news, and you shouldn't believe them when they say there's pedophiles or that Hillary was cheating the election or any of the other things here. Okay? Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right? Let's see. Just sending a message to the control room. I am not taking phone calls about Pizzagate. I told you it was a setup and a fraud, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. Poison the well. And poison the well has been used a lot. They even used it on Jim Garrison during his trial of Clay Shaw. There's a little bit of history you probably ought to be aware of. And what it was is, and by the way, Richard Secord eventually did admit Clay Shaw had been a CIA agent, a contract agent. So that was verified years later. And how they sabotaged Jim Garrison's case against Clay Shaw was they got a witness on the inside of the case. Guy came in, said he'd seen Clay Shaw and Lee Harvey Oswald, and it all seemed to check on out. And Garrison put him on the stand in front of the jury, at which point one of the government's lawyers came up there and sort of led this witness into how he would fingerprint his own daughter every night to make sure they were not planting a substitute on him. And, of course, it absolutely discredited Jim Garrison's entire case to have such a loon as a witness. And, of course, that was the whole point. They were poisoning the well. And they did it again during the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which, by the way, did conclude John F. Kennedy did die, was the victim of a conspiracy, that there were multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza. And the way they tried to poison the well there was they made a big deal over the fact that photos and the Zapruder film catch this one guy standing by the motorcade route with an open umbrella. And they planted this story. The poison umbrella had a dart gun in it. The umbrella had a poison dart gun in there that paralyzed John Kennedy so he couldn't move when he was being shot at. And that was put out all over what would have passed for the independent media, blogs, and talk radio back then. So when the House Select Committee started up, the very first thing they did is they had identified the individual in the photo, and they had gotten the actual umbrella. And they opened it up and showed it to be just an umbrella, and they're making jokes about, don't point that thing at me, it might be dangerous, yuck, 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 yuck. And, you know, how silly those conspiracy theorists were to think there was anything out of sorts with the Warren Report. And by the way, that phrase conspiracy theorist was literally crafted for the JFK assassination because of all the problems in the official story that kept surfacing. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. You don't want to pay attention. It's a conspiracy theory. Despite that, the acoustic data was so irrefutable, the House Select Committee did have to conclude there were multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza, and hence John F. Kennedy was the victim of an assassination. Conspiracy. All right, we got to take a moment to do a shout-out to our affiliates, and welcome to hour number 2 of the show. We're still talking about the John F. Kennedy assassination and poison the well attacks. It's a propaganda system, rather a propaganda tactic, rather, that was used back then and is being used now with this whole Pizzagate nonsense, and that's all it was. This story was planted out there to try and make the independent media look like they're the fake news by the corporate media that's still trying to pretend they're the real news. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, is Pizzagate racist? If they would have said Taco Gate, it would have been even more racist.
Man, they would have been just, well, I mean, you know, it's Italians versus the Hispanics and everything. But it is, and, you know, this thing felt wrong. And I got to tell you, I got, like, tons of emails. You must put this on your website. I demand you. You're obviously selling out to the Hillary campaign if you don't put this on your website. And, of course, that to me was telegraphing, you know, somebody, this isn't research. Somebody's selling this. And there was never anything to the case. It was all rumor and innuendo. And if you squint your eyes real hard, the logo for the pizza place kind of sort of looks like an emblem that pedophiles use according to the FBI, blah, 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 blah. There was never anything there. And the more I got shouted at in the email that I had to post this thing, the more obvious to me it was some kind of a propaganda operation. And I emailed all of my fellow members of the independent media, and I said, be very, very careful about this. This stinks to high heaven. So what's on?
Everybody needs to stick to the global. This globalism is the issue. Nothing else matters. This is not like, you know, we talk about this before. This is not about Trump and Hillary. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and he has 4 years to reverse some stuff, or if it works, 8 years. But you know, they're not done yet doing, because remember Obama did that purge with the military? You have elements in the higher parts of the military that believe in globalism, and also in the State Department, Mike. So he has to weed these people out, and he better do it quick. You know, because, you know, they're in NATO also. You know, elements of the British,
very
French,
much
German,
so in NATO. Right now, the heart of the globalist movement is in that EU. That was supposed to be the beginning step, followed by the North American Union. But the EU is stumbling. If it comes apart, the globalist vision is over, at least for our lifetime.
And also, Putin, if you look at Brexit, Trump, and Putin, they have given pause. We have a window of opportunity. Putin's already moved his pieces around. He ain't finished yet. But like you said and we said, this is all about people need to stick to this issue, globalism. This surrounds everything we've been saying, is the globalist agenda, private central bank, one world government. That's all hinged on this, not Pizzagate and all this other nonsense. This is the issue, the most important issue. Everything else is like sideline crap.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you. I mean, there are a lot of issues that need to be looked at, and certainly the opposition to globalism is an important one. I don't know that it's really the top one. I think reviving our economy, bringing back manufacturing, getting rid of GMOs so that we can grow agricultural produce other nations want to buy, I think these are very important and much more pressing.
Oh, bringing jobs back here, but that's also part of globalism, because to break up globalism, you got to become nationalist again. That's part of, and then bring your jobs back. That's what you got to do. But the globalists don't want that. They want to have the system we got as it's set up now, but take it even further. The neoliberal, neocon, one world,
neo-feudal,
one world serfdom. Yeah.
The plan was definitely to have all of the agriculture in one area, all of the manufacturing in another, all of this, so that every place on Earth was dependent on the whole planet for what they need. Where they really messed that up was in this botched oil price war against Russia and all these sanctions, which are forcing other nations to become more self-sufficient internally and be able to provide for themselves internally and not do trade across the border. That actually is eroding the globalist vision. And it does look to me like the European Union is about to come apart, and that will basically be the end of the push for globalism, at least for the remainder of our lifetime.
Hey, Mike, would you call globalism almost pretty much the Roman Empire-esque welfare, warfare state of the world?
Absolutely.
Would you look at it that way?
Absolutely, I would look at it that way.
If people think about it, the money they spend on welfare and warfare, the trillions and trillions and trillions, and the people, look at around the world. It's just nothing's changed. Things are worse. They made people's lives more miserable. So their way is a fraud. It's just
it's self-destructive. It's self-destructive. Rome basically operated. They had a very wealthy capital city, and they had a lot of welfare and gladiatorial games, and they funded it all by going on out and expanding their empire and conquering new territories to tax them to prop up that ruling class in Rome. When they ran out of wealthy areas to conquer, the whole thing collapsed because it was a pyramid system. And Rome collapsed and split into the Eastern and Western empires. The Western Empire basically collapsed, triggering the descent into the Dark Ages. The Eastern Empire continued until the Ottoman Empire, and then it too collapsed about World War I.
I mean, all these systems, though, are pyramid systems. Communism, socialism, fascism. There's always somebody on top pulling the strings for the rest of the suckers.
Well, they're hierarchical structures. They're pyramids only if they require a constant enlargement of the base to support it, like a Ponzi scheme. You can have a stable economy and a stable nation that is able to perpetuate itself. It's still going to have rulers and a ruling hierarchy, but it doesn't qualify as a pyramid scheme in the economic sense.
Yeah, that's what makes me laugh about Bernie Sanders. I like some of his issues, but, you know, he's socialist to help everybody, but then he buys his third home.
Well, you'll see that of all the elites. The idea is they want socialism for everybody at the ground level, but they want to be rich themselves. And we saw exactly the same thing in the Soviet Union. And they made a mockery of Karl Marx's theories because the Soviet Union created the most powerful ruling class in history, in theory, to support the classless society.
Yeah, all these systems are unsustainable. You can see it right now, live,
Well, certainly history has said, no nation lasts forever, no system lasts forever. They go through this life cycle of birth and enthusiasm, then complacency, dependency, and finally collapse when they just can't pay for the bread and circuses anymore.
Yeah, that's why you see Eurasia's the future. We've been saying that. That's the next empire.
Yeah, it is. Okay?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Peter, are you there? There you are.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy turkeys to you,
I
too.
want to follow up on what Dustin just said. I agree globalism is a huge problem, but for me, if I'm giving a hierarchy of what we need done, the most important thing for me, is to bring government back under heel. And that's accountability. That's what we talked about opening with Trump saying, or, about not going after Hillary or whatever. That's the number one thing. And if we can bring them to be accountable to the people and to the law, we'll go a long way to making them responsive to no wars or, whatever. But first off, they have to be answerable.
Well, I agree with that, and that's why Trump's announcement regarding Hillary Clinton is such a disappointment to a lot of people. And like I said, I don't like his decision. I think I understand why he made it. Of course, the fact that he, as president, isn't planning criminal investigations of Hillary Clinton. I note that he didn't rule out non-criminal investigations like the IRS looking into the tax-exempt status of the foundation. And certainly Congress's investigations are more of an informational situation that aren't criminal investigations, at least not yet.
Mike, I'm going to give him a limited time on this because we're handling the transition, and the electorals college haven't even met yet, and all the trouble that could happen, and the inauguration ceremony, enormous demonstrations that are planned and all that kind of thing, and the fact that all the intelligence community and special ops are still controlled by people who don't want him. I would probably make friendly noises about Hillary until I took control of all that. However, I also am hearing disturbing things. It's disturbing to me about him not really. He doesn't think he could get the money for the fence, and so maybe he's going to piss backwards on the fence and the border, or the net neutrality.
Okay, well, hang on a second. Hang on a second. I want to address what you just said. First of all, it turns out there actually is a budget allocation to build a border fence that goes all the way back to the George W. Bush administration. They set the money aside. It's never been used, and it's still there. Second, we don't really need a wall, okay? I keep joking about let's just throw crocodiles in the Rio Grande, but all President Trump has to do is tell everybody who runs a social service network based on taxpayer dollars, you are not allowed to spend that money on somebody who is not supposed to be in this country. Citizens, green card holders, people who are in the proper legal immigration framework, yes, they can go on welfare and get SNAP and all the rest of that. But if you really think about it, it is fraud for any of these agencies to take tax money from the American citizens and spend them on people who are not legally supposed to be here. And all we have to do is do that. If the supply of goodies dries up, nobody's going to want to come to this country. They know there's no work here.
Well, you don't need a wall, but you do need a fence, and you have to enforce it. And if they're coming over at $1,500 a day.
Yeah, but again, Eisenhower, with his Operation Wetback, shut it all down with only 10% of the resources of the current immigration, border control, and they've got 10 times the facility. They're being ordered to stand down. All Trump has to do is tell the existing system, do your job. Grab them, fling them back over the border.
The other thing that's disturbing me is this Pompeo guy, Mike, he is a wholehearted advocate of torture, which is one of the things I think I found unfortunate about Trump, certainly. And then I'm hoping that Trump keeps his word about, an accommodation with Russia. But, man, oh man, in my opinion, you can't have anything without accountability of government. It may as well not even be there. We may as well not even be talking about anything if they're completely out of control, which you and I, I'm sure, agree on that they are, and they can't be brought to heel and are held accountable. So that's my...
Well, Trump's got his job cut out for him, and again, and I said this on the day after the election day, anybody who thinks that Trump is going to fix everything now that he's won the presidency is dreaming. It's going to take a long time, and we are going to have to help him. We, the American people, are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump, and we're going to have to glare through those front windows of the offices of the senators and representatives and say, you work for us. You don't work for Big Pharma. You don't work for the military-industrial complex. You don't work for Israel. You either do your job properly, or next election we will do to you what we did to Hillary Clinton. And the message will sink in, but we're all going to have to work together to support President Trump. Thank you for the call, Peter. Got to let you go. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to our telephone lines here. Frank in London, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. No, I just wanted to address the this idiocy of globalization, financial globalization, because if one country gets hit, everybody goes down. So I believe in nationalism, where nations are able to take care of themselves, because or else there's no financial firewall. It just doesn't make sense to me. What they want to do, put everybody on a world welfare state where they give everybody hands out, where they can eat enough just to eat cheap GMO food and die out.
Well, that's certainly part of it. The whole idea of a global government is you don't have any choice. You know, this is the government, this is the world, this is your Michelle Obama school lunch menu that you're going to be eating, and you don't have any more choice. And you will be forced to be dependent on paper currency or electronic currency loaned at interest to keep you a debt slave. The whole point of globalism is to turn the entire planet into a single slave plantation, and by the way, you're the slave. And you're right, it's very, very dangerous, okay, because I agree. National borders serve the same function as fireproof doors in a building or watertight hatches in a ship. They contain a problem so it doesn't threaten the structure as a whole. Now, the globalists want to block open the fireproof doors and just simply remove the watertight hatches because they think things are going to run better. They can run around the entire structure unimpeded and feel important. But the first fire or the first leak will destroy the entire system. I think humanity is best served with a planet Earth that has 1,000 little tiny, roughly equally sized and shaped nations that are each taking care of their own people. And yes, there's still going to be some trade across the border and tourism and all the rest of it. But we don't have this situation where a single large company can threaten the rest of the world to conform their economic realities to the benefit of a foreign power. And certainly this idea that there's going to continue to be experimentation in new ways of organizing societies. And that is something else globalism will end. If they ever succeed in getting a global government short of a complete total breakdown and collapse, there'll be nobody out there saying, let's try a different system. See, that was the beauty of the United States of America. When they broke free from Europe, they had an opportunity to say, let's try something a little bit different. Let's try a government where there is no central ruler with autocratic power. Let's try a country that doesn't have a state religion. Let's try a country that makes its own money and doesn't borrow it at interest from the banking families of Europe. These were all truly revolutionary ideas, and they're what made the United States great in the first place. But of course, the banking cartels have always been attacking government-issued currencies. They want us to be their debt slaves. Politicians in our own country have tried to consolidate power in Washington, D.C., to take us back to being a mirror of the monarchies of Europe. In fact, we had that ridiculous editorial in the New York Times about a week ago saying maybe it's time to get rid of all this electoral college nonsense and just have a monarchy in this country. And, I mean, that's basically an insult to everybody who helped bring this nation into being all those years ago, to just say, oh, let's just go back to making the same mistakes Europe did.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex in San Antonio. Alex, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I'd like to ask you a question regarding the whole Hillary and Trump thing, and then make a comment. My question was, do you think perhaps Donald Trump was was updated or put abreast of things that perhaps are going on in the federal government, so as to bring down the entire cabal and to leave other people exposed. Maybe, because some people were saying that, including some economists were saying that the person that we stopped hearing about or stopped hearing from was Valerie Jarrett back in the day. Mm-hmm. And they said that since we stopped hearing her, a lot of things started leaking out even more.
All right. Well, Alex, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to take another break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you and reply to the questions after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Alex in San Antonio. And Alex, at this point, President-elect Donald Trump is receiving the same classified daily briefings that President Obama does to bring him up to speed. Now, that's just current events. Trump is going to have to dig to find out what's going on in the background, but I'm sure those in the know have taken the pains to say, be very careful about getting into this area. And as I've said many, many times before, there are two categories of secrets in Washington, D.C. politics. There are the little scandals, like Anthony Weiner and his sexting problem, that become the fodder during campaigns to smear each other with, to wreck careers, get them out of the way as you seek promotion. Then there are the great secrets, the ones that could, in theory, destroy the entire government. The truth behind John F. Kennedy's assassination, the truth behind 9/11. And if I am correct, and Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments using her weak private email server to deliver the product, and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. That is a scandal that could literally bring the entire government crashing down, just as Donald Trump is stepping in to manage it. And given that Donald Trump is probably saying, I had nothing to do with this in the first place, why should I face the consequences, then he might be very amenable to the idea of keeping the lid on this and try and repair the nation as he moves forward.
What about draining the swamp and all that? What about getting to a point, everything that he campaigned on, regarding the, getting to a point where he levels with the American people and he says, okay, so this is really what's been going on, and this is why these decisions were made. I mean, at that point, he's reneging. He's just another politician.
Well, yeah, he is. And I think this is going to put the lie to the idea that being a businessman, that he wasn't going to be very good as a politician. Look, I'm just disappointed as you are. I want to see the Clintons in prison. I really, really do. But I understand from Trump's position why he doesn't want to blow up the government in the process of doing it. Now, there's plenty of other swamp to drain, for him to work on. And again, somewhere down the road, we may see something break on it. Technically, Donald Trump, by saying, I don't plan to bring criminal investigations against Hillary Clinton, technically he's already committing obstruction of justice, because it's going to be up to the Attorney General to make that determination once Trump takes office. Okay?
Do you think perhaps he might be going the route of Putin, where he let the central bank stay private, but he took control of it, and perhaps he's kind of dealing with the fire, not necessarily putting it out?
Well, certainly with the economy, that's definitely what Trump is going to be doing. He's inheriting an economy that's on the verge of imploding, and if it does, he'll get the blame for it, the way Herbert Hoover did. He may actually decide that it's time for more direct control of the Federal Reserve, given that it is critical economic infrastructure to the entire nation. And we've had all of these chair people of the Federal Reserve come on out and say, well, we're actually not really part of the government, and we're here for our own profitability in business. But there, again, the problem for Donald Trump, or for anybody sitting in that Oval Office, is how do you correct whatever problem is in front of you without actually causing more damage?
Mike, but the answer, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but the answer is very clear, and it's been and it's been made obvious by the American people in overwhelming numbers. All he has to do is tell the people, hey, listen, this is what's going on. I'm leveling with you. Let's go online. Let's use all our tools, all our resources, and let's come to a consensus, a good national consensus. I mean, the American people are wise enough to do it.
Wait a minute. Look at all those people who voted for Hillary Clinton. Look at those idiotic anti-Trump protesters who decided to sign wave on the I-5, and one of them got hit by a car. Okay, I'm sorry. All of the American people are not as educated and wise as the people who are listening to this show, and we have to take that into account. And again, the issue is, how does Donald Trump correct these problems without actually triggering more damage? He doesn't want to implode the federal government now that he's basically its CEO. No CEO destroys their own company. I mean, that's unrealistic.
No, for sure.
Oh, okay, but what you're suggesting is basically for all the lies to be made public. I'd like to see that, but it would bring the entire government down the way the former Soviet Union did. And and certainly for me and a lot of other people, the collapse of this particular government would actually be a good thing. But setting that aside, if it is possible under President Trump to change course and take this nation back towards being a republic with a democratically elected leadership with honest and fair elections and avoid a collapse and avoid a civil war, I think my instinct is, so let's go that route. Let's try that. I don't like the fact that Hillary Clinton is going to skate on this thing, but as I said before, I understand why Donald Trump may think this is the best solution.
And that's what I was saying. Maybe Hillary Clinton is part of a grander plan, and that's exactly why he's letting her skate. Because hey, if we go on in and investigate it now, we screw the pooch, and we don't get exactly what we're looking for. You know, yes, we come out and we're clear, but we don't really get ahead. We actually set ourselves back because the plan we actually have in place is actually working well. You know, I mean, that's just a speculation.
Well, yeah, are you familiar with Occam's razor?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we need to apply it here and just say the simplest explanation is
We've been applying it, Mike. We've been applying Occam's razor, and it's every time we fall short. You know, I mean, it's time to just like.
I don't think so. We succeeded in preventing Hillary from stealing the White House. You know, we have a better educated, more skeptical American people. I don't see us as falling short at all here. But again, the simple explanation is that Donald Trump is realizing exposure of Hillary Clinton's espionage and treason and betrayal would discredit the entire government and bring it crashing down just when he's ready to start trying to fix it. And I don't like that decision, but I can understand why he might make that.
I appreciate your time, Mike. Thank you very much, and I appreciate everything you do. And we'll keep investigating and keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll get in the end what we want, and and we'll get some clarity on this. Thank you very much. God bless, and have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And again, I do not envy Donald Trump his new job. He's dealing with an economy that is basically on life support, and there isn't a whole heck of a lot that he's going to be able to do about it. I think probably the best that we can expect in the first 100 days is that certain predispositions and biases in the government to favor certain parties over the American people as a whole may start to reverse back. Now, one of the criticisms I have had for the last several presidential administrations, in particular those whose rise to power trace back to that CIA gun and drug running operation, is they weren't keeping an overview of what's best of the entire nation. Okay? And that should be the job of the president. Because we expect corporations to be greedy. It's unrealistic to think they're ever going to be anything else. We know the corporate media is always going to lie because that's what they're paid to do. And they're paid very well to do it. They're not going to stop doing it. That's their business model. Okay? So what we need, though, the role of government is to stand in the middle between the needs of the nation as a whole and the greed of the corporations and act as an umpire and figure out what's the best optimal course through it all. And as Harry Truman used to say, it doesn't matter what you do, there's going to be some son of a bitch who doesn't like it, and that's a reality of high office. I think, so far, Donald Trump is trying to keep an eye on the whole nation, the long view, the broad view, and I hope we're going to see his policy decisions reflect that. Like I said, I understand that if Donald Trump, first of all, we're presuming I'm correct. Hillary Clinton was repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal and selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. If I am right, and Donald Trump is looking at that, he's looking at a scandal that, if it were made public, could, in fact, bring the entire government crashing down. To him, that's not a viable solution. So I don't like what he did. There's a part of me that wants to see the Clintons brought down for what they've done as an object lesson to future politicians. But I can understand why maybe he felt he had to steer the middle ground. When he was out there saying you should be in jail, he may not have known the full scale of what Hillary had done and how exposure of it threatened the nation itself. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Christy in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. What I came to, and I agree with you completely about Hillary, these guys are master strategists. We've seen that over and over. I would never second guess them. I don't have the range of information, and so I've sort of settled this within myself to trust the strategy. These people don't end strategies. They move it around. And I think if your listeners can see that, we can hold off on any judgments about it.
Well, I'm going to judge it, and it's a very difficult position. On an emotional, personal level, I am very angry. Okay, that once again the Clintons skate away scot-free. Okay, but putting myself in Donald Trump's position, I can understand why he may have felt this was the best of his available options.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I just, strategies move around, and they have to move around. And these guys have shown they are absolutely masters at that. So that's about all I have to say.
Well, I disagree with you. If they were absolute masters at it, we wouldn't be in this mess that we're in. The fact of the matter is that they have screwed up and slipped up and messed up so many times that we are in this situation where the American people don't trust the corporate media or the government or the politicians, that we have a government that is literally becoming impotent and paralyzed because most Americans aren't going to do what the government says anymore, even with Donald Trump at the helm of it. Would have been worse with the President Hillary, but we have a general population that is not automatically on board with whatever the government is going to be doing, and that's going to complicate Donald Trump's problems.
I agree. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. So, moving on along here, over in California, where they are still whining and crying over Trump's victory and getting run down on the I-5 because of it, they are now seriously talking secession. And there is now a signature gathering operation underway to put the secession of California on a future ballot. And the group is called Yes California Independence Campaign, and they have filed their proposal with the Attorney General's office, preparing a circulating title and summary of the enclosed ballot measure, Calexit, the California Independent Plebiscite of 2019. And a plebiscite is a vote for independence from a body, or to join with a body. It's basically a vote that changes your allegiance to whoever you're going to be. Crimea went through a plebiscite when they seceded from Ukraine. That's what a plebiscite does. We had one here in Hawaii all the way back leading up to 1959, but it was incomplete because the plebiscite vote given to the Hawaiian people was become a state of the United States or remain an owned territory. And there should have been a third option, which is return to being an independent nation, because the war was over, and a lot of Hawaiians are feeling very cheated. And by the way, yes, there is a movement in Hawaii to reassert our independence and sovereignty, the nation of Hawaii, and it's apparently gaining a lot of ground at the United Nations, which is beginning to recognize that the statehood of Hawaii is in fact legally questionable. Same thing up in Alaska. We know there are secession movements in Texas, where even the Supreme Court came on down and said Congress just didn't have the right to annex Texas and make it a state. There are issues with California's statehood process. So we'll see. We could actually see this country start to break apart, just as the European Union is. Now, getting over to the Dakota protesters, this thing is getting very, very ugly. And there's an article over here in RINF.com, the brutal treatment of the DAPL protesters reveals the coming police state. Because what we have here is a group of people who are living on land which is theirs by treaty, and the government comes on in and says, we're going to take the land away from you, and we're going to give it to an oil company to run a pipeline right through the middle of where you live and through some of your graveyards, and we're really sorry, but we need to do this. Now, the brutality has been escalating greatly, and the Dakota Access Pipeline people are out there trying to blame the victims, say, well, they're professional protesters, they're troublemakers, they're bringing in all these outside agitators to cause all the problem. Well, I'm sorry. Apparently, over this weekend, there was a real tragedy. A young lady, Sophia Walensky, was literally hit with a concussion grenade. Now, these concussion grenades, flashbang grenades, are supposed to be detonated away from people. They make a really loud noise. They confuse people. They're disorienting devices. And apparently this young lady was literally, the police threw a flashbang grenade right at her, and it hit her in the arm and detonated, and it looks like her arm's going to have to be amputated. Just absolutely shattered it. And the police are out there saying, well, we're absolutely sure that we're not using any of this stuff inappropriately, which is, of course, what they said down in Georgia when the police down there threw a concussion grenade into a baby's crib. But this has really gotten totally out of control. Now, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, more about the Dakota Access Pipeline and the protests. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And that loud racket you hear outside the window is there's a military training flight of helicopters flying over, and they're not very careful about those mandated altitude limits as they used to be. So they rattle the windows on us every once in a while. We're talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline. We're talking about the protests. There are basically two issues. First of all, the fact that the land involved belongs to the Native Americans by treaty. And then the U.S. government comes on in and says, well, we're eminent domain, we're going to take it and turn it into an oil pipeline right away. And the issues are that the pipeline is going through the Sioux Indians' sacred lands. Now, that's kind of a loosey-goosey title. What's involved here are burial grounds. So before you get on the case of this whole sacred lands issue, just imagine that you have grown up in a small town, and your family has been in that town for many generations, and your grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and aunts and uncles and all of them are buried in that cemetery out behind the town church. And then imagine the government has come on in with a bunch of bulldozers and said, sorry, we got to put a pipeline right through that cemetery. That's one of the issues. The other is the threat to the water supply and the health of the people living along that pipeline route. And, of course, what we're getting from the pipeline company and from the corporate media and from the government is that's ridiculous. These things are perfectly safe, even though we've had a couple of really bad oil pipeline accidents just in the last few months over in the southeast. But here's where it gets interesting. data that was compiled by Associated Press, the corporate media, shows that between January 2012 to September 2013, North Dakota had 292 oil spills. Only one of these that involved a tanker truck accident that happened in full view of witnesses and couldn't be hushed up. That was the only one made public. The others, 291 oil spills, were concealed from the people of North Dakota to protect North Dakota's oil industry. And this is why the people on that land, who call themselves the water protectors, why they're concerned. Because you get a big oil spill, it takes forever to get things back to normal. Look up in Alaska where they had that huge oil tanker run aground. The bay is still wrecked. Okay, we're coming up here on the top of the hour station identification. We've got two callers waiting on the line right now. I'm going to ask you to be patient because I'm going to come back to you after the network identification, so we got plenty of time to talk here. Interesting little story coming out of ZDNet. Catastrophic botnet to smash social media in 2017. This is related to the botnet Mirai. Now, I wonder who wants social media to go away. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go right to the phones, starting with Dorothy in Pennsylvania. Dorothy, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha. I know you spoke of Common Core last week, but I was just curious because I didn't hear anything about the diehard liberals in our school system and what's going to happen to them, like the diehard liberal principals and assistant principals. Are they going to be losing their jobs or something like that?
I think when you look at the fact that outside experts are now saying that our millennials generation are utterly useless because the education system hasn't actually taught them job skills, but just indoctrinated them with liberal socialist dogma. I think a lot of these people really ought to be given the pink slip here. We need to get our schools back to teaching our children how to solve problems, how to think, how to analyze, how to design, how to create, in order to make us competitive once again in the global marketplace. Back when Trump won the election and everybody was talking about all the liberals heading for the border of Canada, and somebody was joking, look, we have to close the border. I mean, how many art history majors can we absorb? And somebody did that wonderful faux commercial for a charity, Sponsor a Millennial. And it was just hilarious. Very well produced, by the way. Good production values. And yeah, that's a big problem. I really think our current millennials are going to be another lost generation where we're going to see the actual control and running of the nation skip a generation. It's going to go from the current controllers to their grandchildren and just skip over the millennials because they're out there. I mean, the fact that they're out there putting on virtual goggles and living in a virtual reality alternate universe where Bernie Sanders won the presidency and that's where they want to live. I mean, they're too far gone to redeem right now.
As a parent, what can I do?
If it's allowed where you are, homeschool as much as possible. Or take it upon yourself to sit down with your children and say, okay, the public schools have had you, now it's my turn, and I got to teach you a few things they're not going to teach you. And just spend as much time as you can with them.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We're going to let you go and switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha.
Aloha, Nuni.
I got you twofold.
Okay.
Gotcha. Two thoughts. One is taking a step back to the political genre and so forth. In a way, I can understand, not so much appreciate. Gosh, I almost got myself there for a moment. Why Obama was inserted where he was between the Bush clan and the Clinton clan and whatever you want to call it, for that dynasties for that matter, because quite frankly, the aspect that Obama basically said, we must not look backward, we must look forward, and basically let the Bush dynasty basically get off the hook for all the illegal.
Yeah, that's why they tolerated it. I mean, Obama was a wild card. When, during the 2008 campaign, they were so worried about Ron Paul and so hyper about Ron Paul. They put all of their attention on Ron Paul, and Obama, basically unimpeded, was able to come on in and start commanding a large part of the electorate. And I remember there was this private meeting between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. It took place, I think, in a house in Massachusetts. They made a big deal. Secret meeting between the two leading candidates. And I think the deal was struck at that point. Hillary was trailing in the real internal polls. She was seen as not having the experience that Obama did. And so Hillary made a deal. Okay, Obama, you get the White House, and then in 8 years it'll be my turn. You're going to make me Secretary of State, so I have a foreign policy credential that I can take on the campaign trail. And Obama went along with it, which led to 8 years of one foreign policy disaster after another, after another, after another. Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Benghazi. But she was able to hit the campaign trail saying, I'm a former Secretary of State and I know foreign policy.
Yeah, and as a result, that being a nightmare and a disaster, and now as a result, with Trump being there, it's like a repeat of what was already done earlier. So
no, I disagree. I disagree. There was no secret meeting. They were fighting against Trump right up to election.
No. I never said anything about a secret meeting. No. I wouldn't even put that past him for that matter. So let alone her. It's just the aspect that. It seems to be a repeat, minus the secret meeting, of whatever's being done legally or illegally or whatever, and how the upcoming party is handling it ad nauseum and so forth and so on. Now, that aside from that part, as far as the Dakota pipeline nightmare is concerned... Well,
before we go into that, I want to respond to what you said. What Trump's presidency signifies is, at least for the time being, the end of the narcocracy, because their original plan, going all the way back to Arkansas in the mid-1980s, was the Oval Office would be their hereditary right, passing off from a Clinton to a Bush to Clinton, and they're already grooming Chelsea Clinton for a run for the House of Representatives to get her on the path to the White House. But Obama was allowed to become president because he went along with it. He just commuted the sentences of another whole huge batch of drug criminals. I mean, it's not even like they're trying to hide where the source of their money and corruption is coming from.
Well, the reason why they're not trying to hide is because basically they realize that the everyday person is probably not even paying attention. Well, I think. So why not just let it be out there in the broad daylight?
I think they misjudged that, which is why Hillary lost the election. And
there's that too.
Yeah, there's that too.
Now, as for the pipeline deal, last I comprehended, there was a temporary stay of action with the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the pipeline being asserted and so forth. And I can appreciate why they're going through a whole nightmare fiasco over it, because being that it's going into or across a lake, which is where they basically get their water source from.
That's exactly right.
I know myself, I would be absolutely outraged if, well, for one thing, whoever the politicians are that are in the pocket of the corporations that are doing this nightmare, the question is, who is not questioning them? But I would be having a canary if someone did that to a lake nearby where I live at. I'd be having a canary. I'd be raising unholy grief of something like that being done. I mean, it's like, you want this pipeline? Stick it up your own tail, not mine.
Well, see, here's the problem. The water safety is a critical issue. The oil industry has a very long history of terrible accidents. We know from the Deepwater Horizon disaster that the government agency that's supposed to keep the oil companies behaving, the Minerals Management Service, is totally on board with them. They think their job is to help them. And we found out that the manual blowout preventer on the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig was 4 years overdue for its mandated maintenance. and the Minerals Management Service did nothing about it. So we already have a situation where we know the government agency that's supposed to keep an eye on safety isn't doing the job. And so, with the revelation that there have been 291 oil accidents in North Dakota in less than 2 years that were withheld from the public, you can understand why these people are very, very concerned.
Well, true. And besides, when it comes to the safety of that deep ocean horizon and so forth, quite frankly, when people that are handling the safety of the thing, getting their pockets layered as they are, do you really think they're going to even bother with that safety issue? No, they're not. They're like, okay, I'm doing my time, putting my time in. I'm not going to worry about how safe it is. My pocket's layered. I'm going home. Bye, y'all.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And
they don't give a rat's testicle about how it affects everybody else around them, let alone their own family.
Well, see, this is where Donald Trump's easing the way to fire poor performing government workers is going to be a big improvement, because the reason we have the Minerals Management Service not caring about the Deepwater Horizon's manual blowout preventer, the same reason the SEC turned a blind eye to Bernie Madoff for 12 years. The way all these government agencies, they can't be fired. They just sit in their offices. They go on the internet on their taxpayer-funded computers. They have a lot of fun. They draw really huge paychecks compared to ordinary Americans, and they just do whatever they want because they can't be fired.
Oh, I know.
Well, that needs to change, and Donald Trump has signaled that is going to change. That everybody's going to be expected to demonstrate they're doing their job, and if they're not doing their job, they're going to be fired and have to go into the private sector.
Well, we'll see how that turns out, because I know when they had that housing bubble burst wide heck open, that was not in itself, and quite frankly, how that actually got set up to occur.
Well, yeah. I mean, you had all the various regulatory bodies that were supposed to be keeping an eye on all this stuff. The SEC, they were just looking the other way.
Thank you. That's pretty much it, because quite frankly, I'll put it this way. I had chatted with someone who deals with appraisals of houses and so forth. And in order to find out when the scheduling is supposed to be done to do an appraisal of a house for you, you cannot be told when the appraisal is supposed to be done, because, one, when they came out of college to know how to deal with an appraisal scenario legally, it was made a total fiasco, because people that had nothing to lose money-wise basically had houses that had never been set foot into, appraised for a certain amount of money by an appraiser who never set foot into it, and end up creating the bubble that burst like it did, and which caused a whole fiasco, which hurt everybody else beneath them, which they consider...
It's not just that. I mean, going back to the original Whitewater scandal in Arkansas, where and the SNL collapse, that was all being facilitated by having appraisers who would over-appraise very poor properties in order to pledge as collateral. And it's a lot of skullduggery going on out there. But we live in a society in which crime pays, and the big criminals remain unpunished, and we've lost our moral compass along the way.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about is a whole design of dominoes that to go off in a specific order, and believe me, it's been collapsing.
Yeah, it is starting to fall apart. Anyway, listen, Francis, I'm going to let you go because
have a great one.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mike in Tennessee. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Greetings, Michael. I just want to reemphasize for those listening that may not know this, the white people in the communities not far from these people up in North Dakota went to court to block the pipeline from going through their community, and they won, citing the concerns about the contamination of their water supply. Now, if all is fair, then these people having the same concern should validate the need to redirect. And I, for one, believe that this is Canadian oil that's going to be exported. Run that puppy across the continent of Canada, or, the country of Canada, and ship it out of Nova Scotia.
Well, you're absolutely right about the hypocrisy of the court cases, and it's even worse because some of these water protectors, protesters, have gone into that white town to try and leaflet and demonstrate about their concerns, and the residents of that town are screaming at them, go back where you came from, which is kind of ironic when you realize that those are the original owners of that land. But the phenomenon is called the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And it's an area where there's a lot of political fighting going on. And ultimately, unfortunately, all of these things, whether it's an oil pipeline or a trash incinerator or a nuclear reactor, they get stuck in the areas where citizens have the least amount of ability to influence politics. And that's what happened here. And again, these Dakota Indians got screwed. That land was supposed to be theirs by treaty with the U.S. government, and then the U.S. government comes on in, says eminent domain, we're going to take it, we have to protect the desert tortoise or something, then they turn around and they lease it to the oil pipeline company. And here's the issue. Here's the issue. If the Dakota Access Pipeline Company was building an absolutely safe and unleakable pipeline system, and if they would simply dipsy-doodle around the burial grounds, this would not be an issue. But what we have here is an arrogance of corporations who are out there saying, we're going to just run this pipeline where we want to go. It's not going to leak too bad because we make more money with a cheap pipeline that leaks a little than building a pipeline that doesn't leak at all. And that is really the crux of the issue. And the people on that land are just expected to go along and live with it. I mean, look at the whole fracking situation that's been going on, where people have built these very expensive homes in the area where fracking is going on, and all of a sudden they can't turn on the water taps in their home without them bursting into flames, and all of a sudden the home is now completely worthless because nobody's going to buy a home to live in this area where all of these petrochemicals are floating around, which are carcinogenic, by the way. And it's just like the oil companies have become gods. You know, the big oil, they're worse than the arms manufacturers and big pharma put together in terms of their absolute disdain of ordinary people, not to mention health and safety.
Well, Mike, given the fact that this local military police force has taken federal funding, obviously by the MREPs and the sound cannons, the other things that they have at their disposal, Trump, all he has to do, just like when Ford heard that he was going to create a tariff and the jobs needed to come back to this country, and so they stopped the removal of the jobs from Lexington, Kentucky down to Mexico. The same thing. All he has to do is publicly state that these people will be held accountable, and if we need to send them to the war, the World Court in The Hague for war crimes or crimes against humanity, even that, if not that, the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act, if you take that to the World Court, you prevail. Those guys serve life sentences for what they're doing. Life sentences. So they need to have the message brought from Trump. This would give him credibility in the areas of protecting we the people from a tyrannical corporate government. And if he did that overnight, he would force these military types away from the area. The natives would be able to have their drinking water preserved, and the pipeline, send the damn thing across the country of Canada. Other than that, they can go to an international court and seek judgment because the United States courts are private for-profit corporations. They can get a judgment in an international court, and they can... Well,
there's a couple of venues they could go to the United Nations for one thing, but let me back up here just a little tiny bit. The question here is, the health and safety of the people and what legal actions they can take. I think what's going on here, first of all, if Donald Trump had come out with such a statement 2 days ago, it would have had an impact. Unfortunately, because of his announcement regarding Hillary Clinton today, at this point, he's destroyed his credibility, and nobody's going to take him at his word anymore. They're going to wait to see what he does, but he doesn't get to do anything for real until January 20th. And I think we're going to see a lot of various agendas try and ram through what they're doing to completion before Trump can take office. We're certainly seeing that with the wide open borders and immigration. We're certainly seeing that with the war hawks trying to provoke a war with Russia. I think that explains why ever since the election, the brutality against the Dakotas protesting the pipeline has definitely taken an upward jump, including the crippling of that woman with a concussion grenade actually thrown at her, which is not how they're supposed to be used.
Well, they are, in fact, a corporation. These are a sovereign people, and therein lies the difference. They are real human beings. Those are fictions written on paper, and those people can be held accountable in an international tribunal, a world court, and whether you go to the World Court in The Hague or the Universal Supreme Court of the Chilcotin, universalsupremecourt.com or .org, you'll find that there is remedies, but you have to hold these people accountable.
Yeah, but that's a very long and convoluted process. I have another solution. If this poor young lady does lose her arm, I think they should just directly sue the Dakota Access Pipeline Security Company because they misused the concussion grenade. You know, it says in the instructions, this is, you throw it on the ground and let it make a noise. You do not throw it at people. And just like those Georgia police were held civilly liable for the damage to the baby, this Dakota Access Pipeline Security Company can be held civilly liable for the loss of this woman's arm. They could literally sue them into bankruptcy. That's going to take a lot less time and send a much stronger message than a long, drawn-out, convoluted international tribunal situation. So, Mike, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, take a break for commercials. We've got a bunch of calls waiting to get on the line. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. The phone lines are just loaded up here. Andy in Texas, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Mike, I just want everybody to reiterate what the heck is going on here, okay? We're not just dealing with the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation here. We're dealing with a new world order, okay? This thing's been going on for over 100 years or better, okay? We're not just dealing with these guys. So I think the reason why Clinton has been kind of shunned from the, other than the fact that it's the Attorney General's job, but been shunned from the process of being prosecuted. I also think that there's a lot of people that put a lot of time, effort, and money into getting us to where we're at, and all of a sudden we've got this invisible guy from nowhere that she couldn't steal a landslide from, and now we have this guy here. So I think a lot of why he's not doing anything to go after these people is simply because his life has been threatened more often than we probably think it has. And you can't beat a group that doesn't want to be beat. And
well, I'm sure
in the last 100 years.
I'm sure that Donald Trump accepted that his life was going to be in danger when he declared for the presidency. If he didn't, then he was being delusional. And we know that during the campaign, there were photos of him where he was clearly wearing a bulletproof vest underneath his clothing. So I don't think that's a new factor. And again, I don't think Trump, I know he's going to be afraid of the narcocracy, and I'm sure Trump understands that his life is at risk for very much the same reasons that John F. Kennedy was. But I think his decision to not prosecute Hillary Clinton is really tied in with the fact that if the entire scale of her crimes became made public, it could destroy the entire government itself just when Donald Trump is getting that top job. And so I think that was the deal that was made. I will not criminally investigate you if you shut off the riots and stop the death threats against the electors and so forth. So like I said, as we get into next week, we need to keep an eye. If the protesters are still going, if the electors are still getting death threats, if my server is still being hacked, then something else is going on. But I think that was the deal that was made. I can't imagine Trump destroying his own credibility that thoroughly without a really, really good reason to do it.
Well, but, I mean, at this particular point, because we know there's so much corruption in the government, I mean, anybody and everybody who's been paying attention to what's going on in this government, they can simply see that we've been corrupt for years and years and years. So what? And this would be a question, I'm just going to ask it. What would be wrong with tearing the entire government down and starting again?
Well, I'm not entirely opposed to that idea. I mean, certainly with the view of Hillary as president, that looked like the best option. With Trump in the White House, it's possible to still save this nation, but I'm not willing to bet any money that we're still not going to go through that collapse, simply because that central government is hopelessly corrupt and unrepentant about their corruption.
Well, we got Donald Trump putting Band-Aids on things. If he comes in here, he's going to try to put Band-Aids on things.
He hasn't done anything yet. Okay, Donald Trump can't actually do anything until January 20th.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm prefacing out in front of his. He's going to put a bunch of Band-Aids on things and try to correct things, when in fact it really should be flushed down the toilet and started again.
Well, again, there's merit in your position, and a lot of people agree with you. And in a way, I certainly early this year saw that as the inevitable fate of this country. And call me naive and call me hopeful. I'm thinking that the fact that we were able to pry the White House away from the narcocracy this election, that we were able to overcome the election fraud, it's a starting point. And we still have a long road ahead of us to try and prevent that collapse, prevent a civil war. And the first and most important thing on my agenda is to call attention to the fact that the election system is completely fraudulent and crooked and unverifiable. And it is possible to have an election system that is much harder to rig. And we need to get it implemented in the next 2 years.
And there lies my last comment. We got, a 10% approval rating of our Congress, and yet those same warts that are growing on our hands keep coming back to Congress.
Well, thank goodness for Diebold. That's all I can say. I mean, John McCain, one of his campaign fundraisers got busted for running a meth lab, and he still wins re-election. I don't trust those results either.
There you go.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We got a bunch of callers waiting on the line. I'm going to ask you to be a little bit more patient because I have some news I do need to get to before I can go back to the phones here. I'm getting all kinds of emails saying, don't worry, Hillary's going to be prosecuted by Sessions or something along that line. Well, I really don't think so. I got one email where apparently Joe Biggs and Alex Jones are out there with the story that Trump is just leaving Hillary to the Attorney General while he leads the country, which in point of fact is the way it's supposed to work. But if that were true, why bother with the announcement? That announcement was bad for Trump's credibility and his public image. It's angered his supporters who supported him specifically to see the Clintons rot in prison. So why make a public statement? Because a message is being sent. The deal has been accepted. And I would like to see the Clintons hauled up in court as much as anybody else, but at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. And again, if I am right, and Hillary was committing treason, betrayal, espionage, while serving as Secretary of State, then all she's got to do is say, the instant I'm in court, I'm going to admit it, I'll confess. And the fact that the entire U.S. federal government did nothing about it will bring the entire U.S. federal government crashing down. As that other caller said, might not be entirely a bad thing. But when you evaluate Trump's statement, you have to include the fact of the statement itself. Why make a public statement? Because this idea that Trump is just going to leave Hillary to the Attorney General and she's going to be prosecuted anyway, okay, maybe. Why does he need to make an announcement? So, hey, I was right about Pizzagate, right? All right, before we get back to the phone calls, I have to do the obligatory nod to ClimateGate and human-caused global warming. It's been snowing for 38 hours straight in Syracuse, New York. They got about 20 inches there already. The storm system brings early snow to areas north and west of New York City. Near record November storm buries Rochester. CNY drivers, including a meteorologist, described being stuck on I-81 for hours. The freeze was so hard there, cars couldn't get up the hills. Huge, huge traffic jam. Foot of snow on the Berkshires. Had heavy snow over in China, resulted in a 56-car pileup, leaving 17 people dead. NOAA just put out another one of their statements about how this is the hottest year on record warming all over the place. Somebody noticed that on their map, where they're indicating huge temperature increases, there are no temperature stations located there. They're relying on their computer simulations about what's going to be happening. We don't need to look at the real world. The computers are telling us what the reality is, just like that computer program that Hillary's campaign was using, okay? Now, getting back to the category of the fake news, remember the big one? We were hearing it from all the TV news. 97% of scientists agree that human-caused global warming is real. And that number was a hoax. Mark Steyn dug into that question. How many scientists really think human-caused global warming is real and a major problem? And he discovered that this 97% number was arrived at by mailing out a 2-question survey online sent to 10,257 Earth scientists, of whom only 3,146 responded. 96% of those came from North America, 6.2% from Canada. And basically, despite the narrow sample, because you can't say if you invite 10,000 scientists to participate and only 3,000 show up, you can't say 97%. So the researchers simply cherry-picked 79% or 79 of the sample questionnaires and declared them the experts they relied on to come up with that number. It was completely made up, and the corporate media reported it as real. All right, let's see. We're going to grab some phone calls here. The Analog Anarchist in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you for bringing up the Dakota Access again. I didn't want to tie up a whole lot of stuff with it, but there is one minor correction. It is not the government that is doing the eminent domain. It's the private pipeline companies, and they're doing this through a minor provision of the Natural Gas Act of 1938.
Well, if it's involving the Natural Gas Act of 1938, that's the U.S. government.
But the company itself gets this piece of paper from the Fed that's a certificate of public need, and they walk that into a local court and say, we've taken this, this, and this, and this by easement. What's happening is the 2 strips of land remaining to go under the river are technically Army engineers' ownership, even though they are Aboriginal title tribal treaty lands. For technical real estate purposes, it's
now wait a minute. You call up and you say the government isn't doing this, and then you say that the company got this document from the federal government, took it into a court, and said we're taking all this land. That sounds to me like it's a government operation.
No, it's a private company doing it.
It's a private company wanting it, but they can't do it without the assistance of the federal government. You said it yourself.
No, they don't. They get a piece of paper that says it's a certificate of public need. The federal government is not connected with it anymore after that. The private company walks into the local court with this piece of paper and says, we want an easement here, here, and here.
I'm sorry. If the federal government gave them that piece of paper, they are definitely complicit. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Karen in Maryland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, my question is about the Electoral College. Is it up in the air or questionable at this point as to whether or not the Electoral College is going to cooperate? And then number 2, does the Electoral College have the option of just not voting instead of, voting for one or the other, just abstaining from voting, period?
Well, they can't abstain. If they do that, the election would be thrown into the House of Representatives, which is Republican-dominated, and we all know who they would vote for. So the Electoral College right now, what we're hearing from all of these electors who are receiving the death threats is they're angry. And I think it's definitely working against Hillary Clinton. Now, there was that Hail Mary plan by a couple of Republican electors to reach a compromise. They don't want to vote for Trump. They realize they can't vote for Hillary Clinton. So they're trying to run this idea of literally giving the White House to John Kasich as a compromise candidate. But they require so many electors to become faithless electors. I just don't see it as happening, because never before in history has there ever been more than one faithless elector in an election. And usually it's a protest vote by an elector who already knows the candidate that they're supposed to support is going to win anyway, so they vote for somebody else as a form of protest. But the idea that they're going to get 20 or 30 of the electors to break ranks, that is just really very, very absurd. I don't see it as actually happening. And if it does, if the electors vote for anybody but Donald Trump, it's not going to be seen as legitimate by the American people, primarily because of all these death threats these electors are getting.
Okay, now let me ask you something to follow up quickly. Is there a reason why the electors are not put on the ballot like everybody else is? I mean, are electors, always, elected privately, internally by the party? Why aren't they on the ballot? Do you know?
Probably to keep things simple, I think. We already saw during the primaries where they were putting the delegates on the ballot, and in some cases weren't even saying who the delegates plan to support. And so a lot of people were going into the primary elections and they had a list of names and no clue which ones were going to support Bernie Sanders. It was one of the many ways this election was messed up. It does need to be simplified. It does need to be made more transparent and verifiable. But I think the idea of the electors being chosen by the state is a way of guaranteeing the state's interest, because we do need to strike a balance there in that if it's a straight popular vote, which a lot of people are now saying it should be because that way Hillary would have won. No, she wouldn't have, because Donald Trump would have changed his campaign and still won. You would see the elections dominated by just 4 states. New York, Florida, California, and Texas would basically decide the election for the rest of the country. And so the Electoral College system, in part, is designed to guarantee that the individual states have a larger voice regardless of their population. The same reason that every state has 2 senators no matter what its population is.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in Philadelphia. Mark, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I just want to ask you a question. This concerns the compromising of local jurisdiction of law enforcement, and there's the recent article, and I'm just catching your show the last half hour or so. U.S. Denver sheriff illegally excluded non-citizens in hiring, and I want to come right back to that. But here's the thing. We have 300 sanctuary cities. Now, I don't know if anybody's connected the dots with this one. We have 300 sanctuary cities, okay, where basically that's a way to compromise local jurisdiction of law enforcement to be able to go after illegals who are in that area. So get this. I want to see if there's a correlation between the drugs that are coming in. We're talking about heroin, because heroin, from my understanding, it may be being sourced in Afghanistan, but it's coming up and through Mexico, and it's being run. Is it possible that these drugs are being run into these sanctuary cities, 300 of them? And I wonder if there's a correlation between the drug overdoses of heroin, because the heroin's a killer, along with meth. And my understanding is some meth coming up from Mexico too. But has anybody ever connected the dots with that if local jurisdiction can't go after somebody that looks like they might look the other way and not even question that person being here, and they might be running drugs. I don't know. What say you?
Well, I would say that the immigration issue aside, if anybody is caught dealing in illegal drugs, the police have every right and duty to go after them. I know that the heroin and cocaine are coming in from Mexico. Meth can be made locally, so I don't know how much of it needs to be smuggled up from Mexico. You can set up a lab. And remember, I said one of John McCain's fundraisers for his recent re-election got caught with a meth lab early in the year, and still somehow this guy seems to get re-elected. I do know there is a correlation between the sanctuary cities and those cities where Hillary Clinton did extremely well at the polls.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's my understanding. My understanding is that the heroin, because, by the way, Philadelphia is the #1 drug overdose for heroin, from my understanding currently, and it was even reported in National Geographic show Drugs, Inc. Their most recent episode was about Philadelphia. So, and all the drug addicts, the heroin drug addicts, are coming to Philadelphia because they figured that, hey, if there's that many overdoses, hey, it must be some really good stuff. How sick is that? But here's the thing. If the heroin that's coming into the country is the most potent it's ever been and the cheapest it's ever been, okay? Mm-hmm. I say that somebody's flipping the switches. This sanctuary city idea, who's flipping the switches in our government to allow the sanctuary cities to exist and to allow the borders to be open? There's an inside group that's opening the borders. These are infiltrators to destroy us from within. So I'll leave it at that, Mike. Thank you.
Well, that's certainly one of the overlapping areas as well, and certainly the New World Order globalist people want to destroy the American consciousness, and drugs certainly go a long way toward doing that and creating all that additional chaos. All right, we're going to switch to James in Tokyo. Ogasaimas, Ogenki desu ka? What's on your mind?
What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
I'm doing fine.
Good. First of all, about the pipeline. Where the hell is Billy Jack? He should be back there helping out.
I remember that. Oh, my God. I really loved that movie when it came on out. That was a great movie.
That was a great movie. Hey, talking about your 38 inches in Syracuse, Mike, you're totally wrong about the global warming, because if there wasn't global warming, it would have been 380 inches, and they'd be putting out all the corpses with ice skates, you know?
Well, you know, the reason I put all this stuff up, can you turn down your radio or whatever it is you're listening to, because I'm getting a bad echo here. I actually got an email from somebody saying, look, we know the winter's cold and you're in Hawaii. Why are you complaining about this, blah, blah, blah? Well, the reason I'm hitting this point over and over again goes back to that March 20th, 2000 article in the UK Independent. Snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And it's just another reminder that all this screeching about human-caused global warming was a lot of nonsense, and I'm glad Donald Trump recognizes it was just a hoax and a fraud to trick us out of our money in carbon credits and so forth. And I'm glad he's retasking NASA away from Earth monitoring to actually getting something done. But I'm going to keep hitting it, because the Old Farmer's Almanac is saying it's going to be a really hard winter. Meteorologists who are not in Al Gore's pay are saying, yeah, this is going to be the coldest winter in the last 5 years at least. And so we have to keep hitting this. Now, of course, Al Gore and his people are trying to sort of back away from human-caused global warming and saying, well, we're talking about climate change. Oh, yeah, nobody questions that the climate changes. It always has, and it always will. It was changing before humans evolved. It'll go on changing after humans are gone. It's ridiculous to say that you can stop climate change until you can put a thermostat on the sun and literally shift the Earth in its orbit. That's the only way you're going to be able to have any significant control over the climate.
Michael, calm down. That's the number one threat to mankind, okay? Now, about the earthquake.
Oh, boy, was that
big. The earthquake. That was pretty heavy. That was pretty heavy here in Tokyo yesterday. The building was swaying, but it was only like a 3. They said it was a 3, but it felt like a 4 or 5. And my beach house, my other house, yeah, that was fine. But anyway, yeah, that was very, very significant.
Well, the problem with Japan, the problem with Japan is that they've got a very strict building code for the buildings to deal with earthquakes, but unfortunately much of Japan's cities are built over these landfills of garbage that have been laid down since the end of World War II, so they don't really have good foundations. There's a big problem with liquefaction. I saw some videotapes coming out of Japan just today where you're literally having water gushing up, but through the sidewalks and everything. So they were very wise in terms of their quake standards for the buildings, but they built them on a very, very poor foundation. And so it is going to be nasty. The part that worries me, of course, is we may see even larger quakes in that area. And again, the cooling system for reactor number 3 was knocked off service for about an hour and a half. And if there is a bigger quake and another tsunami into the wreckage of that reactor site, and it floods those pits in the ground, they could actually start more natural fission. It's an ugly situation. Anyway, James, sayonara, and we're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And first of all, I want to do a little kudos to Mike in our control room, who's dealing with much adversity, and I don't need to go into the details, but he's being a hero today. We're going to take our last phone call of the day, Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thank you. There's this lawsuit against the woman I think is the most expedient way to stop what I think, and I fear, could be a future potential turning our the breadbasket of America into a dead zone. And it's not just because of the fracking and human error and the brutal winters that I think are coming, but this natural disaster, you know, the New Madrid Fault is not going to go away. The whole area, Nebraska's next to Iowa, Kansas is just to the west of Missouri, where the whole thing is going to center, and the whole area is under the surface. You have these stacked plates that are described as like stacked pancakes, and the destruction is going to be so widespread if that thing goes.
Well, I mean, the same thing can be said for the Yellowstone supervolcano, but nobody knows when it's going to happen. Certainly, I think if there were fracking along the New Madrid Fault, there would be an area of concern, but so far, at least, they are prudently staying away from that part of the country.
Well, if this is going down the middle of the country, right, or not? The pipeline is actually over in North Dakota, and the New Madrid Fault is considerably further to the east of that. In fact, it's on the other side of the Mississippi River. Yeah, but that's close considering the widespread damage. It's going to go at least halfway into Kansas. There was a special on PBS. And how they're preparing for it, and that it's going to be felt all the way to the Rocky Mountains on one side and the Appalachians to the other, because of the area under the soil is so unstable and can cause such widespread. Those vibrations can go nowhere but east and west until they hit a mountain. So I think
that's not how seismic waves operate, I'm afraid. And anyway, listen, Sherry, I understand your concerns, but again, it's just like the Yellowstone supervolcano. Could happen. When's it going to happen? Nobody really knows. Might not happen in our lifetime. We have more pressing things. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to go ahead and close the phone lines because I'm coming up here to the end of the show, and I got to take off and do Jim Goddard up in Vancouver here. Now, if you are like me, you probably, when you abrade your skin, you want to get some aloe vera. And if you're not lucky enough to have an actual aloe vera plant, you will go down to your Walmart or CVS, Target, and you will get their aloe vera gel in a bottle. Unfortunately, according to a story that came out of Oraz.com, samples of store-brand aloe gel purchased from Walmart, Target, and CVS were tested in a lab and were found to not actually contain aloe vera. And we have come to understand there's a lot of fakery and fraud at the retail level. A lot of what you buy that's got the name honey on it isn't real bee-produced honey, so forth and so on. So you got to be a little bit careful. And it's not that hard to grow an aloe plant. Learn some gardening. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here. Share it with everybody that you know. I would like to say that we can take a little bit of a breather here, but it doesn't look like we can do that until January 20th. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.